Before we begin, I'd like to say that this is part 2 of a story I did a while ago. If you have not listened to part 1, please go in the description and click on the link to start from the beginning. And here we go. After first contact went over extremely well, the new arrivals that looked like walking, talking moose decided they had to leave. They needed to report, as this was just a fact-finding mission for them. They would be arriving back in several human years, but it would still take time for them to get back to their own species and then return. In that time, they expected to have a whole bunch of trade going on with humanity. Humanity didn't mind at all. They believed that the new technology would be a massive boost to everyone. And what did they trade in return? Just some food that they could just regrow the next year? Not a big deal. As the Toes fleet, which everybody wanted to call them that, as everybody started affectionately calling them camel toes, but that didn't actually hold water too much. The true way of speaking their species name was Toes, which was extremely difficult for a human to actually pronounce. Just pronouncing it now is pronounced incorrectly, and no one to this day has been able to say it right. However, once the Toes left, everybody thought things would calm down. They didn't. Humans being humans, all the governments of the world wanted the technology that was left behind, saying that this technology had to be turned in or else you're going to be charged with something as dangerous as treason. Of course, this did not go over well at all, as many small towns now had a whole bunch of free energy. They were now off the grid. Sometimes they had devices that would build other small devices, not much bigger than a coffee cup and only one solid piece at a time, but still, all they had to do was feed these machines. It was wonderful technology. The quantum generators are what really went off, as everybody was now energy independent, and this is something nobody ever wanted to give up. It took several years, and unfortunately, a lot of blood. After several governments tried to rush into different towns to try and strip them clean of any of this technology, which meant they had to go house to house to house in rural areas where everybody is strapped. And many of these farmers are good enough to shoot the dick off a fly at 300 meters, as they have to hit varmints at well over that distance to get them off the land. Eventually, things did calm down, and soon the law was passed that any technology that was traded with the Toes was yours to keep. And this calmed everyone down. After which, everybody started to do the same thing. Everybody wanted to learn how to grow vegetables, grow them in an abundance so that they could trade as well. Yet, most people didn't realize this is not something you can pick up overnight. It took years, many, many years. For most farmers just starting out, if you had never grown anything before, it takes 3 to 5 years to figure out how to grow something correctly and grow it in abundance. Certain vegetables were easy, of course, but certain ones turned out to be in high demand because they couldn't be grown. This, of course, dropped the vegetable market down into the gutter, but nobody really cared. Everybody just wanted the technology, and that's what they were going to get. Exactly on time, the Toes fleet returned, but this time, they're not alone. And this time, humanity had ships that could actually go up to greet them. Though a meager fleet by any stance, 2.5 dozen very small ships that could barely be counted as corvettes went up to meet the Toes fleet. The Toes fleet was grateful that humanity was now starting to reach out. Perhaps they would terraform another planet and create even more food for them. Of course, the Toes still talked in that arrogant tone, but they were still welcome on Earth. In many cases, they returned to the same small towns, and every single time, everybody within miles and miles and kilometers upon kilometers would bring their wares in, mostly food stocks, but sometimes something a little special to see if they could barter with the Toes. The Toes were grateful for this, absolutely ecstatic, and many of them traded very, very expensive equipment, at least by human standards, for crates, pallets of food, many of which they were surprised were actually preserved. And this is where the excitement began. As it turned out, the Toes didn't realize that you could actually preserve these vegetables in any other way except through cold storage. They were surprised. And when Larry and everybody else in his small town walked over with several jugs of black tea, they also had something that they could sell. They brought out the same cucumbers they had before, as they were once again in season. However, they also brought preserved cucumbers in the forms of pickles. This time, the moose were looking at them strange, and many of them were disgusted, as it looked like something straight out of their sewer, but very neatly and tightly packed. They were confused for sure. Yet that is when the jar was actually opened, opening with a sudden hiss from the canning process. It was held up, and many of the moose immediately sniffed the air deeply, taking in the deep vinegar scents, along with dill and all the other mustard seed and everything else that's in there. They were surprised. What is this alluring odor? At that point, being so tall, many of the bull moose that were standing there didn't realize that they were getting a little excited about the prospect. A few of the folks in front of them, to include Larry, took a step back as they didn't want to get jabbed. And that is when many of the bulls tried to excuse themselves. Extremely embarrassed, they would turn away, ask to be excused until they calmed down. As many of the bulls simply went away, Larry offered the same thing to their mates, their cows. They'd even brought a few of their young. And all of them wanted some of this, yet they could not quite reach in with their very large hands into even a wide-mouthed jar to pull it out. When they did, they finally got just a little bit. Some of them just got a little on their fingers, and they licked it. And they paused. In several cases, the humans would bring out a utensil called a fork, lift out some of these, put it on the hand, and many of these females threw it down into their gullet, and with a small swish in the mouth, as since it's not crunchy anymore, they paused. They all just stood there. And once again, humanity held its breath, saying, oh shit, did we screw up? Did we screw up? What's going on? Are they paralyzed? Why aren't they moving? They're not even blinking. What's going on? What's going on? Even the little ones were amazed at this. They were kind of shocked, and many of them said it made them feel funny. This was odd. They didn't understand what felt funny meant. And as they looked on, several of the females simply buckled their legs and then dropped. Anybody who was a medical professional ran up and asked if there was anything wrong. Is there anything they can help you with? And the females just kind of stood there or sat there, but they didn't move. Eventually, it seemed like some invisible signal came out. They all grabbed a jar of these pickles, upended the bottle right down their throat, chewed them all up, and immediately turned towards the ship they came in. And before anybody realized, they were at full sprint. The bull moose that were on the other side, right in front of the ramps, were confused at this. Why were their wives running at them? As they told their wives to halt, they were surprised the wives would not stop. The wives simply ran up, grabbed their mates, and dragged them inside as fast as possible. The bulls were surprised at the strength that was going on. They couldn't understand what was going on until they realized something. They could smell it in the air. Uh-oh. They yelled out through all the translators to excuse them for the next several hours. Every human outside was confused. Did we screw up? How bad did we screw up? We screwed up big, didn't we? Oh, crap. And the little ones were outside just grabbing different foodstuffs and enjoying the taste. They barely did touch the pickles themselves, because after it made them feel weird, quote unquote, they decided they didn't want any more. However, lids were put on and preserved for later. The little ones enjoyed going around to things like tomatoes, zucchinis, carrots especially, potatoes. In some cases, they even found something called cattail, which apparently grows all over this planet. Though they couldn't eat the whole thing, it seemed as though they enjoyed the bottom of the stalk and the tuber to be extremely delicious, as they would say. Many of them eating to the point where they started to ask where they could relieve themselves as they were too full, which many of the humans realized, uh-oh, we weren't ready for this part. Rushing them into an area where they could relieve themselves, the kids came out and simply wanted to eat more, and everyone realized, hey, kids are going to be kids. Eventually, they ate so much that they just sat down and didn't want to get up. Everyone waited for the adults to actually come out of their ship, and eventually, multiple hours later, the doors opened once again. Not a single female came down, and only about half of the males did, yet they were moving strangely. They looked over at everybody, and Larry walked up and, Sir, what's going on? Are you okay? Did we do something wrong? On the contrary, you have done something very, very good. But I do ask that you keep a lid on those. It seems there is a effect. And, he pauses for a moment, and one of his subordinates actually steps forward. What he means is we simply would like many more cases of this. However, could you make sure that they are sealed very well? And what do you call these again? Oh, these are pickles, Larry said, along with everybody else holding up different ones. One person yelled out, I got bread and butter pickles. I got dill pickles over here. This is when the toes were amazed. There are different flavors. With that, Larry didn't have to say anything. He was grinning. One of the women next to him goes, why not? We're foodies. Every human turned with a bit of derision, like, really, you said that? And yet all the toes were like, okay, I don't get it, but whatever. It was at this point that everyone seemed to calm down, realize what's going on, and realize that making a bunch of jokes might not be the best of ideas. But this is when the barter truly began. The toes bartered for hundreds of thousands of tons of food. Fruits, vegetables, preserved or fresh, it didn't matter. Different areas of the world had different things to barter with, and the toes were bringing in all sorts of equipment. They would end up sending many of those quantum generators, so many that it seemed like every single house was going to have one. They sent in a type of molecular rearranger that not only built something that's solid like a coffee cup, but something that could actually build multiple pieces, though the pieces must be put together by hand. This also came with the instructions on how to have this machine create parts that they would need to build to create larger machines that build larger pieces, and so on and so forth. The toes explained that this is how species reach out to the stars. They build up, and they build up fast, and they reach out clumsily at first. Everybody expected the humans to stumble about, especially around their home planet, for a long time before they actually started to reach out to the stars. Eventually, after about a week of barter, swapping out the food for the machinery and everything else, the Toes fleet said that they were in need of leaving. They had things they needed to do. Most of humanity would ask them, when are you going to come back? They were given the same timeline as before, and of course the Toes were told when to come back for certain items, especially in the early fall. That's when the Toes started to ask when or what would they get, and that's when everyone responded, that's when most things are fully ripe, things that we don't have right now, things that will actually aid in your food procurement, and I'm sure they're going to be quite tasty. with that, most of the toes would just about drool right there. But trying to hold on to their own manners, their own dignity, they would simply turn away and slowly wipe their jowls to make sure they weren't spitting on anything. As their fleet left again, everybody got ready. They wanted to be ready for the next time the toes show up. It will be another couple of years. However, it's going to take a while to get used to all this new technology. Along with that, it's going to take some human ingenuity to adjust this technology, to make it better, to give it more power. More power. Of course, it would be more power. And then they would be able to meet the Toes fleet out in space beyond lunar orbit, and they would be able to show that humanity is growing, humanity is stronger, humanity is not just a food stand. It would be a place that they would like to visit more often, and then more trade would come. After several years, everybody expected the Toes to show up, and the Toes did, but not in numbers that anyone expected. Everyone expected a massive fleet, a fleet twice the size of what they showed up before, but what they received instead was only about a dozen fairly mangled ships. They didn't understand what was going on. Humanity's fleet, now managing several thousand ships to include destroyer and cruiser sizes, went out to see what was going on, immediately started repair and recovery operations. Many of these ships were barely held together with little bits of wire and good intention. Everybody wanted to know what happened to their friends. What the hell is going on? The answer would change everything. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 2 of a formerly just one-part series. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Prozac and Pancakes. And I also need to send out some giant thank yous to the supporters of this channel. And they are Brian Kemp, Erica Gem, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, MTF Guard, Joseph Blosh, Steve Uig, Douglas Scarborough, and Julius Boone. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting!